Hi, I'm Jeff Rains, the pastor of First Baptist Church, Shreveport. I'm so glad you're listening today to the First Baptist podcast. We worship every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. at 543 Ockley Drive in Shreveport. There is always a place for you.
I am Pharaoh, son of the sun. You've probably heard of me. My name is Ramses II, offspring of mighty Ra, the sun himself. I am a god amongst men. I am the divine ruler of the Egyptian empire. My armies are great and terrible. They conquer according to my every whim. They pillage and conquer. My name strikes fear into the hearts of my enemies. They shudder when Ramses comes down the road. My slaves erect massive monuments in my honor, pyramids and statues 1,000 times the size of life. They jump to obey my commands, no matter how severe. Men and women attend to me every second of the day. Legions of hairdressers and manicurists, perfumers and launderers, guards stand watch not only over me, but my wardrobe at all times. 20 officials, yes, 20 grown men, work together to manage my toilet. My people worship the ground I walk on. I am their God. I am their king, and I am due their undying service and gratitude. My glory will live on forever. My name will be eternal. My word builds cities. My decree commands armies. My will is unchallenged. The earth bends before me. I am unmatched in power and majesty. Or so I thought. Let me tell you about Moses. I remember him when he was just a little Hebrew boy, this storied prince of Egypt, a babe plucked from the Nile and put into a bassinet in Pharaoh's palace. He was always around the court, this Hebrew boy growing up with the royal family. What luck! What injustice! What undeserved elevation. An Egyptian lord, everything he could have wanted at his fingertips. The best clothes, the best food, the best teachers, all of it was his. All while his people wasted away under the thumb of old Pharaoh. He played in the gardens, they made bricks. He feasted, they starved. Sheer dumb luck. He should have been drowned in the river, but instead a favored son of Pharaoh. Until he threw it all away. You see, we should have known when we invited a Hebrew to live in the palace that nothing good would come of it. He went out and murdered an Egyptian man, and then he hid his body in the sand. And when they uncovered his crime, he fled like a coward. Old Pharaoh was furious. He put a price on the man's head. We assumed he just died in the wilderness, and the name Moses was forgotten, like it should have been from the beginning. So you can imagine my surprise, many years later, when this same Moses comes sauntering into my throne room. He was different, sure, old and gray, but he had this striking arrogance about him, like he knew something I didn't. And he looked right at me, and he spoke to me with this unnerving authority. Where did that come from? Who was this mortal, this son of slaves, this castaway to speak in such a way to mighty Pharaoh? I'm sure we must have looked so strange, he and I. Total opposites. Moses, this dirty runaway fugitive emerging from the wilderness, and me, perfectly kept, the God, the King, the most beautiful man alive. We may have looked completely different, but we did have one thing in common. We both thought we commanded the room. He hadn't come alone. He brought this silver-tongued sidekick named Aaron. But Moses had this look about him. I'd seen it before, this look of defiance and authority. I'd seen it in the faces of kings right before I conquered them. That look never lasted long. Moses came in my throne room and he shouted at me and he said, "Pharaoh, I have a message for you." He says, "Yahweh, the God of Israel, says to let his people go." And how clearly Ra had baked this man's brain after all of his years in the wilderness. How could he speak in such a way to me? And why? Why would I release my greatest workforce, my property, my slaves? They were busy building my monuments. An absurd idea. I said to them, "Who is this Yahweh you speak of?" I had never heard of such a God. Of course, I knew Ra and Horus and Osiris and Anubis and all the other sacred deities, but Yahweh's name carried no power. Moses said to me, he said, "He is the great I am, and you are to let his people go. Let them go, or Yahweh will make you pay." He dared to threaten me. I was angry, sure, but more than that, I was dumbfounded, confused. I couldn't believe it. I said to him, "Does your great I am know who I am?" I mean, even if he exists, he must be the God of ragtag beggars and slaves like you. He has no power against me. Who was this God of the Hebrews? Who was this Yahweh that he dared to command me? Am I not God? Does the sun not rise and set upon my word? I should have killed him then. I decided he didn't speak on behalf of some God. He was just a mutinous liar. He was just trying to incite those lazy Hebrews to rise up so he could be king over Egypt. Those lazy, good-for-nothing Hebrews, never grateful for what they had. I sent Moses away, and I knew exactly how to fix their bad attitudes. I took all the straw that they used to make bricks, but I said, "You have to make just as much." They were busy working day in and day out. I kept them so busy they couldn't ever rise up to rebel against me. I thought the matter resolved. The people groaned, sure, but why should I care? They were slaves, I'm king, my monuments went up, and life goes on. But then Moses and Aaron, they come stumbling back before my throne, not quite as arrogant this time. Clearly my denial of their make-believe God had stung quite a bit. But they sought an audience with me because they thought they had something that would wow me into submission. And so that silly sidekick, Aaron, he threw his staff on the ground, and it turned into a snake. And they looked at me, so smug, as if I should be impressed. They thought they had me. Instead, I gestured at my magicians, and each of them threw down their staffs, and they turned into snakes. Our magic, just as strong as theirs. But that wasn't the end of my encounters with Moses. A few days later, I was going down to the river. I was going to pay respects to Hapi, the river god. And as we got close to the shore, I saw Moses and Aaron over on the other side. And Moses shouted out across the river. He said, "Let my people go." Of course, I refused. That wasn't something I was going to do. But he said to me, "By this you shall know that Yahweh is Lord." Aaron reached out his staff and he struck the Nile River, and it turned to thick red blood. You wouldn't believe the smell. This vigorous Nile River, the pulse of our empire, became a cesspool of putrid blood. The fish began to float. The smell worsened. It was awful. But here's the thing, my magicians could do it too. They took water and turned it into blood. So I just laughed at them. They had no power over me. That river plagued us for 7 days. It was atrocious. My magicians could turn water to blood, but they couldn't turn blood to water. I figured it was just a matter of time until they figured it out. And I wasn't about to give in. He just wanted my throne, after all. So when he asked me to free his people, I didn't grant his request. I wouldn't give up my control. So you know what he said to me? Here come the frogs. What? I mean, compared to the stench of the river, how bad could some little hopping toads be? Turns out it was pretty bad. They came in droves. Hundreds of thousands of these creatures overtook our city. They covered the streets. They came into our homes and got into the food. They came into the palace and got in my bed. No rest from the croaking. And the more my servants carried away, the more took their place. I was going out of my mind. One of my brilliant magicians ran up to me, all excited, and said, I figured it out. I can do it too. And he made more frogs come up. So I had him executed. The last thing we needed was more frogs. Finally, I couldn't take it any longer. I summoned Moses and begged him. I said, whatever it takes, just take this curse from our house. Take this plague. Take your people and go. And I could see the smirk on his face as he went out to pray to his God. At that point, I didn't care. I needed relief. I would have given anything for relief. But relief came, and the frogs disappeared, and I just couldn't bring myself to uphold my end of the bargain. The thought of admitting defeat to that smirking Moses made my blood boil. Who is this beggar who thinks he can bend the arm of great and wonderful Pharaoh? I make the decisions around here. My word is law. Magic tricks and curses are not about to bring me down. So the Hebrews stayed right where I wanted them, in service to me. Now Moses didn't like that. Next, he sent a plague of gnats on us. They swarmed in and devoured the flesh of man and beast alike. It was like the very grains of sand rose up from the earth and turned into these buzzing pests. Throughout all of the land, gnats. There was no safe place. This time, my magicians couldn't figure out the trick. They looked at me and they said, surely this is the finger of God. I pointed at each one of them and had them executed. I'll show them the finger of God. Moses and his Yahweh continued to plague me and my land. After the gnats, they sent swarms of flies, thick as black pillars of smoke. And then they killed our livestock. One by one, our animals dropped dead to the ground. And as we mourned the loss of our stock, boils broke out. Huge, bulging, pulsating boils as painful as hot coals covered our bodies. There was no relief. It was one after the other. And as we suffered, the Israelites looked on, untouched. There was a clear distinction between Hebrew and Egyptian. I was hurting. My people were dying. The plagues of frogs and gnats and flies and boils had brought us to our knees, but still I refused. Letting the Hebrews go would be to admit to the power of their God. And to admit to the power of their God would mean that I am not divine. I am not all powerful. No. I was not going to let this Yahweh win. Surely his power was about to run out, I thought. Then the skies broke open. Hail and lightning like we had never seen fell from the sky. It was like fire flashing in the night, again and again and again. The hail flattened trees, destroyed buildings, killed animals. The storm gave me a new understanding of the word terrifying. My people cried out for mercy. My officials begged me to concede. This one-sided battle with Moses' God was ruining us. Let them go, everyone said. But each time we felt relief from a pestilence, my anger and hatred towards Moses and his God was renewed. Who do they think they are, demanding something from me? Trying to coerce me? No. Those Israelites weren't going anywhere. They were mine, under my control. Moses came to me and he said, "The Lord asks, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me?" As if a man like me needed to answer a question like that from the beggar God, Yahweh. And then he brought the locusts upon us. They ate our crops, devoured our fields. Everything green was gone. And still I resisted. And then he brought darkness upon us. It was some black magic, and they blotted out Ra. He took his light from us. We were devastated. And for the first time in my life, I felt small in the face of whatever power was behind Moses. I thought we'd experienced the worst. I assumed this battle was almost over. How much more destruction could there be? I imagine you're probably thinking that I should have just given up. You've been listening to my story and you're wondering, well, why didn't I just give in? And you're probably right. But tell me, haven't you ever felt that need, that burning need to control? Or maybe you're stubborn like me, and the more that someone tells you to do something, the less likely you are to do it. Or maybe you've had that deep down feeling that says, I'm in charge, I make the decisions, I'm master of it all. Maybe you're not like me. Maybe you can bend the knee. But I am not going to bend the knee. I'm not going to obey. I'm not going to submit. It's my life, my path, my authority, my power. I've seen the power of God, but I'm not ready to stop being God myself. I can do it all on my own. I can withstand any storm. I can match power for power. I am smart enough. I am strong enough. I am tough enough. I will not submit. Moses had warned me of the power of his God, but I didn't believe him. Remember how I told you that my name was going to be eternal? I was right about that, at least. My legacy will never be forgotten. The Pharaoh who should have listened to old man Moses. Finally, his Lord's hand fell heavier upon us than any plague before. Late one night, the shadow of Yahweh passed over Egypt, and each Egyptian household suffered the death of their firstborn son. None were spared. My people cried out. I'll never forget the sound that came from the streets of Egypt. I'd heard the sound before when I was a boy as Hebrew babies were thrown into the river on old Pharaoh's command. The mothers cried out, but I didn't care then. They were Hebrews, after all. But the sound that came from my people, it was a soul pain, deep, guttural. It was the sound of a nation being broken in an instant. The firstborn of every house struck down, even my own son. The plagues had decimated our crops, destroyed our livestock and water supply. We'd had great physical pain. We'd questioned our faith in our own gods. But in the end, finally, we learned what it meant to stand against Yahweh. So here I am, broken before my gods and my people. My son is dead. My country lies in ruins. The economy is decimated. Our supplies are withering. We're on the brink of total destruction. But still, who is this Yahweh? Where is he? Where is this invisible God who cares for beggars and slaves? Why would he come against the greatest empire the world has ever known to pull a worthless people out of bondage? Why does he care if they suffer? Why does he care if they die? I don't know. I don't know who or what he is. But I've experienced the works of his hands, and there's something that I do know, something that I have learned, that he is God in this land, and there are none like him. This God of the Israelites is surely an awesome and mighty God. So who is this Lord that I should obey him? He is Yahweh, the God of slaves, the God of storms, the God of judgment, the God who is. He is the God who sees. And now I've seen him too. I've seen him through his works. And I have surely suffered in my denial against him, yet still I resist. I just can't give in. My heart won't do it. If I say that he is God, if I obey his commands, then where does that leave me? If I concede to Moses that I am powerless against this God of his, then what of my power? My authority? If he is God of this land, then where do I fit in? There isn't enough room for gods like me in Yahweh's world. Will you pray with me? God, you are great and mighty, and you care for your people. You love them so much that you pull us out of bondage, out of death, and into life. Lord, may we humble ourselves before you. May we bow before your cross, come to your altar and say that you are God in this land. You are God over all, and that includes me. Lord, may we give up what we think is our power so that we can enjoy life. We love you and we trust you. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for listening today to the First Baptist Shreveport podcast. You can learn more about our church and watch the services at firstbaptistshreveport.org.